This is Dazatron's Diorama Llama, and welcome to a new video on how to create a dynamic rock face. So in this video I'm going to show you from start to finish how to sculpt the styrofoam and how to paint the styrofoam once you've sculpted it. So this video won't be in two parts, it will be all together. So the first thing you're going to do is you will need ideally a piece of styrofoam around about 10 centimeters in thickness. You could glue together thinner pieces of styrofoam to make a block. So really, yeah, it's up to you how you want to do it. And I would suggest you use Gorilla Glue if you are intending to glue together styrofoam pieces. This is easier if you use an electric foam cutter. As you can see, I'm doing that here. And again, there is a previous video on how to use an electric foam cutter and kind of different versions that you can pick up on the market. But it does make life a lot easier, especially when you're carving something this big, really, or from a large block. It's much easier to do it this way. You could use a saw. You could use a knife, but it would take a lot longer. So as you can see here, I'm pulling the blade away from myself, obviously for health and safety reasons. And it's quite difficult for you to see what I'm doing at this point. But I'm just trying to get the initial shape. So I'm just kind of cutting off the corners, just trimming it down, just to make my life a little bit easier later on. You can also see I've drawn, if you like, a template on the side. So this is from, if I remember right, Vasquez rocks. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but that's the rock formation that I've used as my inspiration. So I've done made a sketch of that, just using a felt tip pen on one side, just to give me, a starting point really. And then I've used that then to kind of help me with the rest of it. So what I'm doing here is start to take off each side. And I think that's really important, is as you start to shape your piece, you don't want there to be any flat parts remaining. So you can see I'm just kind of pulling away some of the surface. And of course that's also building up a texture as we go along. So here are the Vasquez rocks that you saw there very quickly. That's what I was using as my inspiration. And you can see this time I'm kind of moving the blade up and down. And what that's doing is then creating this kind of, I suppose, these lines or these textures or grooves in the side of the rock formation. So it's just a quick and easy way to do that. So you can see the pieces you can pull off there. And it's really important that you just keep hold of those bits as well. Don't throw them away. So this is a little bit later on, and I'm just trying to get some deeper cuts now, just to make the piece more interesting. And when it comes to, the type of rock formation that you're creating, it really is up to you. But it is useful just to have a picture in your mind, or printed out, or on your phone, just for you to look at. It just gives you something to refer back to. But what I would say is don't try and make it exactly the same, because you'll find that really difficult. Just use it as a starting point, and that will work really well. So you can see here I've still got the flat pieces on both sides, so I'm just using the same technique again, using that kind of up and down movement to just kind of shape that and pull it off. And I don't want it symmetrical, and that's really important. You don't want it to be the same on both sides, because that's not really going to happen in real life. So as you can see, these are all the bits that were left after kind of doing my initial cut. And as you may have seen in previous videos, I've shown you how to use some of those offcuts to make other dioramas. So I've also just, as you may have just seen, I tested a figure on top of the rock face just so you could see it. And here are some of the tools that you might need. So a knife sharpener, some assorted files, sandpaper, again of various grits is useful, and of course your knife that you're going to use to, I suppose, cut out the rest of the bits really and kind of shape it a little bit more. So in terms of, I suppose, the level of this, I'm still kind of classing it as a beginner's video, although in some ways I suppose it is a bit more difficult than some of the videos I've shown before. But I do think it's achievable even if you're a beginner, but I'd certainly suggest that you look at some of my other videos and try that first. The nice thing about a rock face, compared to other types of diorama that you could make, is that there's not really kind of a lot of right or wrong, and you know, it kind of allows for lots of mistakes, because you know, a rock face is organic in many ways. You know, it's kind of been created over time and it's misshapen. You know, if you make too deep a cut, and you can see I'm getting in quite deep there and just kind of pulling off the bits of styrofoam. I'm not being really neat or really careful. I'm kind of chipping things away and just kind of, you know, flicking things up, because all of that adds texture to your piece. So, you know, we don't want it to be like a surgical cut. But the more you cut away, the more you work back into this, and you end up with like little bits or little mistakes kind of happening. It really does make a difference to the overall look of the piece, and it ends up looking more realistic that way than if you're being really careful with the cuts that you're making. So you can see I'm just continuing to kind of chip off some smaller sections as well as some deeper areas. And as you go along, you stop looking at the reference material and you just tend to get a feel for it. You tend to get an idea yourself of, does it look right? Is it kind of looking like this rock formation? Do I want some more areas of interest, or do I want some deeper shadows and maybe some more parts that are kind of protruding and sticking out? So as I said, you'll get a bit of a feel for that as you start to chip away at this piece. You can see that's what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of creating these kind of deeper grooves in places just to make it more interesting. So when you're making those cuts, of course, you need to cut from different angles. And what you can see here, you can see the finer details emerging now. So like the little kind of nicks on the rocks and the grooves and the dents and the textures. So it really is a case of the more you work back into this, the better your piece will look overall at the end of the day. You can see, you know, there's a lot more variety there in terms of the texture. So it's really great to look at your piece underneath lighting, because that really gives you a flavour of what it will look like in the end. Yeah, really important to rotate your piece as well, because it is a sculpture, so you know, you want to see it from different angles. I guess if your piece was only going to be displayed from one particular angle, you wouldn't need to do that, but I just think it's useful to create a piece that works from all angles, and that way you can kind of change your displays around a bit later on. It gives you a bit more flexibility. So what I'm showing you here is how you want to get the sense that the kind of each part of the rock face, how it moves around the piece. So it's almost looking or treating it as if it's a pile of rocks, I guess. So you're kind of thinking about, when you're creating the grooves and the shapes, how to make sure it's going around the piece. What I'm doing here is, because you get a kind of like a shiny texture to styrofoam and it glistens, I was just using the edge of the knife, the blunt part, just to kind of rough it up a little bit and just get rid of that kind of shiny or glittery effect. And as you can see here, this is, you know, roughly the finished piece. You can still see some of the marks that are made with the electric foam cutter, some of the lines, and of course on the marks that I've also made with the knives. And I've just tried a few different figures on there just to see how it works. So that was a couple of legend scale figures. This is also a legend scale figure, but I think that works really well on this piece. And having the kind of the two peaks gives an area for you to kind of balance your figure on top of. So when it comes to the painting part, you're going to use a couple of colours really. You're going to use the yellow ochre, which is the one that looks a bit like a gold. Now in the tube material I'm showing here, the tube acrylic, I haven't got the burnt sienna. That's actually a burnt umber is the darker brown, but a burnt sienna works better. So that's what you can see in the pots there. It's more of a reddish brown colour. So I'm just taking a lump of that paint, acrylic paint, put it on the lid here, or you can use a plate. I'm using a larger brush just to put the initial kind of washes, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So we're not just using the dry brush effect, we want to paint over the initial coat. So I've already primed this with a black acrylic paint and let that dry overnight, and now I'm using this watered down burnt sienna, this kind of reddish brown colour, and just giving it a wash over the top. The proper term would be glazing, really, when you use a watered down effect. It's called glazing. Now here's a bit later, once it's dry, you can see how dark it goes. If you look at the bottom area, not the top bit that I'm showing off in detail there, you can see how dark that's gone. It's not quite black, it's quite a dark brown. So although it looks quite strong when you put the initial wash over the top, it will go darker as it dries. I've added a lot more work to the lighter area there, just so you can see what it looks like towards the end, just so you got a visual really for that. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So you can see now I'm just taking some more of that burnt sienna colour, and I'm wiping it off on a kind of kitchen towel or rag, but I'm making sure it's still quite damp. Whereas when you use dry brush technique, you really dry it off. That's the whole point of it, is you dry off the brush as much as possible. I suppose this is more like a damp brush technique, if you like. I don't know if that's an actual term, but it's the term I'm going to use. So we're using the burnt sienna, but it's a little bit wetter. I've kind of dampened the kitchen towel as well, just to kind of keep it wet for a little bit longer. And then I'm just brushing that over the top, and again quite vigorously, a bit like you would if you was using the dry brush technique. And if you don't know what the dry brush technique is, again, there's some other videos you can look at on my channel to learn a bit more about that. And I will show you, I will kind of compare the two techniques a bit later in this video. So now I'm moving to the yellow ochre, this kind of golden colour. Again, exactly the same. I'm not rubbing off or drying off the brush as much as I would usually. So I'm keeping the brush quite damp. And you can see there, when I gently rub over the surface or the texture of the rocks, it really shows up. It's quite light and bright. So once you've done that, the way to, I suppose, tone that down a little bit is to then kind of brush over, as you can see now, quite vigorously again. And what that would do, it would just kind of blend it into the surface and also catch some of the other edges. So it's kind of going from that damp brush to the dry brush, if you like, as you move along. So what you'll find is you just move between these two colours. So again, I'm using the burnt sienna, and you can see I'm using that over the top of the yellow ochre as well. So it's just toning down that kind of golden colour. And what you end up with then is kind of these mixtures or these blends of colours. So rather than being one uniform colour all over, you get this kind of mottled effect, with some bits being a bit redder, some bits being a bit more orange, some bits being a bit more yellow. And I just think that creates a more realistic effect overall. So just showing you here the dry brush effect and the difference. You can really see a contrast when you use dry brush between the underlayer or the primer colour and the colour that you're putting on top. And you don't want that much contrast when you're painting rocks. You want it to be a bit more subtle than that. So you do want to see the textures, but you don't want it to be such a strong difference between the highlight and the shadow. So by keeping your brush reasonably damp, it just helps with that. Also just showing you here again just how to really add water to the acrylic to water it down to kind of thin the acrylic out. And I'm just adding another coat over the top of that kind of dark brown. So as you saw earlier, I'd already added an initial coat of this kind of burnt sienna colour wash. So I'm just doing that again just to lighten up some areas because it was looking a bit too dark in places. And that's really the beauty of this technique is, again, you can't go wrong, and that's why I suggested it's still for beginners, because if you make a mistake, you can just go back over it with a bit of black or darker brown. It's just easy to correct what you've done. So you can see I've added that wash over the top, and here I go again. You can see I've added a lot more paint there, so a big blob of paint, and then just kind of smoothing it out on the kitchen towel. So I haven't got blobs on the brush, but it's still quite damp and quite wet, and that's the key. I'm just showing you here what it looks like when you do a dry brush. So we don't want that, we want the kind of damp paint. And exactly like we've used this paint elsewhere, same method, just brushing it over the top. Sometimes it's quite nice to start quite gently just to catch the edges and then moving quite quickly. And this is where I've continued to add some more of the lighter colours and mixing between the shades. So you can see the different shades going on there in that piece as I rotate it. So it's not too far away from being finished now. This part of the technique, the painting, does actually take quite a bit of time. Notice as well I'm using a smaller brush here to the large kind of flat brush I used when I was using the wash technique. And again, I'm just touching the edges with that yellow ochre. It doesn't look very nice when you see it like that, but as I said to you before, if you then brush over the top quite vigorously, it will then start to blend that yellow ochre in, and it won't look so in your face and bright. It would kind of tone it down a little bit. And if it's too strong, again, go back to the burnt sienna, add a bit of that over the top. Or if it's even, if you think you've made a mistake with that, again, you can use a darker brown to take it back to more of the primer kind of colour. But I don't think that's too strong there. I think that works. Another thing to think about is when you're using highlights is to use them in a few different places, and that will create what's called balance then across the whole piece, because you're not just seeing a blob of colour in one area, you're seeing that colour all over the piece in different kind of places or different areas. And you can see I've now toned that down using the burnt sienna. If you do find some areas are too dark, it's good again just to go back to the wash. So again, watering down the acrylic and just working that into some of the grooves and some of the kind of deeper areas, so it's not quite so dark in some of the places. And you've just got to use your judgment on that, really. And it's hard to tell on a video, but when you see it in front of you in hand, you get again a flavour of where to add colour and where to leave it darker. And you can always go back to it once it's dry as well, because that also makes a difference. You do find the colour changes as it dries. Now you can see I've got big pots of paint there. You don't need to have that much paint. just the tubes that I showed you area would suffice really for what you need to do. You can see that shows up quite nice against the darker areas. Exactly the same method as before, using the burnt sienna and the yellow ochre. And that is pretty much there. So hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and put in the comments any ideas for future videos.